I want to kind of dissect a position like this. It's like I can attack by different quadrants. If I'm straight on, there's different attacks. If I'm off to an angle, if I'm perpendicular, if I'm in a back quadrant. And so as we start here, I want to make the distinction between if we were doing just a guillotine here like this. I don't know if I'm legally allowed to do it this way because Gordon Ryan made it. So I don't know, I have to check with him. But like, you can attack guillotines, 10-finger guillotines. You can bunch up the head and the arm and start going for anacondas and darces. So I want to save the guillotine because I've got some details that are good from guard with that. So the first thing I want to start with is if we're head on with the anaconda choke. And you may do it exactly like this, or you may do it a little differently. But this way works really great, especially on YouTube. So whenever we're here like this, I'm feeding from the neck and out by the armpit. That's what distinguishes the anaconda. The exact opposite of that would be the darce, where I go in by the armpit, out by the neck. So as we start in here like this, I'm feeding nice and deep, and this hand and this hand are gonna come together. And I'm gonna put like a gable grip. And as I do that, so this outside hand is gonna be palm up here. And I want that to kind of start it out. So this is bunching up the head and the arm. And then as I start to get up on my tiptoes and I'm starting turning the corner, I'm gonna start looking underneath here, trying to put my head behind his tricep and try to like look in at his face. I'd like to be able to get the choke almost before we ever roll or anything. Like right here, I want the choke to start really setting in. But then like to finalize it, I'm gonna get a little more perpendicular and we'll make the actual roll with it. So as we go here like this, I'm turning the corner here, and then eventually we'll roll here. And I'm keeping just this frame, gable grip like this structure until I get the roll accomplished. Okay? Once we make through that roll here, I could probably finish right here, but I think it doesn't hurt anything, and it can only help to bring the top leg in, incorporate that into sealing up the choke. Because if he starts to open this elbow, he starts to get good blood flow here on his neck. So I don't want this to happen. That's what this is accomplishing. So to make the modification of my arms how I need it to be able, as I need it to be able to seal the deal, then I'm gonna bring this leg on top, right underneath my forearm, here. And then from there now, I can start to shift from palm to palm to karate chop in the elbow like that, right? And then we squeeze, I start driving my hips and belly in toward the back of his head, and that creates the constriction that we need to be able to accomplish that head-on choke like that, right? Does that make sense so far? My hand's protruding through the outside, palm down. This, my second hand is supinated, or my John Cena hand, I call it, and we get here like this. And so then I'm gonna walk around on the balls of my feet, bent knees, crouching in, and then looking through the hole over here, this way, okay? Then as we roll, this direction, here, I'm gonna bring the leg in on top, shoot the arm deep, get a hold of his ribs, and as I squeeze here, I'm also expanding in my torso to push his head into that choke. Right here, the question was, so what if he's tucked a little too tight for me? I can get him by the neck, but I can't really get out by the armpit. Okay, and that's a great question, because like it really reinforces the idea of he chooses, I don't choose, right? If I'm really playing jiu-jitsu, then I'm going with what he's given me. I'm not forcing things to happen. It's great if you can force things to happen, but that requires you to be bigger, stronger, faster, and have better energy reserves, which I always recommend first, right? Only fight smaller, weaker people, right? That's number one. Then get some technique or whatever so that you can beat them even more efficiently and not have to waste your energy. So that's kind of what we're approaching. But I want to take what he's given me. He can't, so here's the idea. When he's in this frame, this is the underneath view of him in this turtle position. He can be guarding his neck better, but he's going to have to leave the armpits a little better open. He can be trapping his armpits down and closing these wedges, but he's going to have to leave his neck a little more open. So that will determine ultimately then, what is he giving me? He's going to give me some combination of wedges around the body, right? Armpits and neck. So if he's really concentrating on tricep to lat closure, I'm just going to go in for a 10-finger guillotine here, right? Because he's giving me his neck, you know, or you can go in for like just a front naked choke, right? So that's, and again, we'll get into the guillotine details later, but right now we're concentrating on Anaconda. So if it's close, don't go, right? But he's not going to close down one opportunity without giving me another one, and he can't defend everywhere. I'm going to do this horrible paraphrasing of I think Musashi saying, like, if you defend everywhere, you're weak everywhere, right? Essentially, your resources are spread too thin. So start this roll. Yeah, I want the constriction to start before the roll starts, right? So as we're going here, I want him to be choking right here, right? And by the time that the roll sets in here, now, what I don't want is I don't want to be choking him up here, right? I'm too stretched out, now my limbs are becoming kind of weak. So while we're here, I'm gonna adjust and get his head down here by my diaphragm. And that's when I'm walking in here this way, right? So it tightens, tightens, tightens. And then when this leg comes in, it's not just up and down, but it's forward. So you're really kind of humping your hips in there. And then eventually closing that up. Right? Okay, any details that stuff didn't help? This way, actually, if you don't mind. Here. So, again, it's gonna be entering by the armpit, exiting by the neck, here. So as I come through, I should have my hand waving this direction, the back of my hand on his trap, this way. How deep am I on this? At least bicep deep, but the depth and landmarks of your arms versus his neck, I don't know if that's the most reliable system to go by as far as landmarks. And the reason for that is everybody's got different arms, you know? Like your arms may be skinnier. Mine are like 23 inches, so it's gonna be hard for me to get into some places. But if you have really short, stubby arms, or if you have big, long arms, it's gonna play out differently. So the two different ways we can get here, again, I like to go for this like kind of gable grip to make this frame across his neck. Now, you can shoot in underneath, but the inherent problem with this sometimes is if you're not really good about your placement and your weight distribution, you're dropping your weight off of him to the floor, and if he postures, you're gonna lose not only the choke, but your position. And I'm not saying that's a bad way at all. There's, like, you watch Jeff Glover do it, and he's a master at it. So, but to work into our framework that we've already built with the Anaconda choke, I'm gonna flip him over instead. So once I get my gable grip here, and I won't be on my knees, but it's just easier if I talk through this way. We get here, gable, or even S, as long as I get the back of my forearm against the back of his neck. And now as I push the top arm down, I'm lifting on the back side here. Now, I'm not going this way. I'm gonna fall and lose my position. Instead, now, I move myself back to where I'm centered with his tricep, and I'm more perpendicular to him. So he's in this kind of fetal position up on his side, and once we make that flip over here like this, I've got his arm kind of tucked already. Now, at this point here, a couple different things you can do. I typically find it helpful with this detail. This detail changed my understanding and appreciation of Darce chokes. And I got this from Rodrigo Gracie like a million years ago. Instead of going here, I can push and pull. That works fine. But I can lock here. And now I don't have to like push or pull. I just hold here. If he wants to arch his head back now, it's very difficult, right? Because I'm stapled to the floor. Now, the other cool thing about this one here too is I can kind of ratchet it up, right? So we go here, I'm gonna ratchet, ratchet, ratchet like that until I get to here, okay? So I block here, ratchet, until I get there. Even on dudes with some meat, a lot of meat right there, it still helps to get the job done a lot of the time, right? What if you can only get to here? Well, just squeeze harder, I guess, I don't know, right? So let's go do the whole thing again here real quick. So in this case, the situation is that I've got an armpit and a neck open, and it's easier for me to shoot into the armpit out by the neck here. I'll make this grip. I'm gonna flip him over and stay in front of him this way, right? Let's turn this over. My connection comes undone, and I staple here like this. So I've got this bar against the back of his neck. I've got my hand on my forearm, and I'm gonna tighten, revving up like this here until I get all the way down. As far as the finish goes, I'm humping my hips forward, squeezing, and getting the tap, okay? So I'm dropping my hips in a little bit. That doesn't mean my chest and head are going up necessarily, but I'm dropping in like this, okay? Does that make sense? I'm that lazy. You don't understand. So when we get here, and I'll trap them over, this is a cage more than anything. So I'm not thinking about all this, right? Again, if you can just get here and crush and snap his collarbone and choke him with broken bone and everything, that's fine. But just the cage is sufficient if his primary defense is this, right? And if he's been Darce choked a handful of times, then when he starts to feel this happening, he's gonna respond by doing this. So I wanna prevent that. But I don't have to prevent it by directly fighting it, right? Because like you get there with somebody with a strong posterior chain, strong neck, strong traps, and they're like doing this, me trying to do this in response is gonna be tough. But this cage right here, that frame, I don't have to exert much force just to keep the bones in place to help prevent that from happening. So, long story short, as we're here, then I'm just gonna ratchet, and that elbow is moving toward the floor the whole time, right? Now, it may happen that we get there, and I do wanna finish kind of perpendicular, and it may happen that you get like more of a crank off of it than a choke, which is fine if they tap to it. The problem is, like, the stronger the neck, maybe the more resistant they're going to be to the crank. Okay? A crank that turns into a choke is fine too. So, but if I get here and I'm like, okay, there's just no way, I'm here, and all I'm really doing is smashing and bringing my forearm up through his neck, and unless I break his neck, I'm not going to get a real submission off of this. So I need to make an adjustment here. So a good adjustment to make is with this structure here, I'm going to roll my ear down toward his floating rib here, and I'm gonna punch this hand through deeper, right?
Oh, yeah.
You see? So look how deep my arm is now. Now, once I turn back square again, boom, that's gonna tighten it up a lot. My bicep is in almost to his neck now by that point, and it should make a cleaner strangle out of that, right? Does that make sense? So if you're getting there and you feel like, it sucks right here and it's painful and that's why I'm tapping, add this detail and see. So one more time. We get here, I've got my little frame structure set up. I'm gonna roll my body here, and then I'm gonna spearhand in that way. Now, once I square back up, I'm dropping my elbow to the floor, right? And I'm keeping my weight hovered above him, right? Again, I don't wanna wind up choking him up here. I wanna choke him down here, okay? Optimal workspace. Questions that doesn't answer. Let me sort out kind of an open, spacious side control. And he's gonna feed me the underhook, right? So he feeds the underhook, I go overhook like this, here. I don't know if I'd be so bold as to call this a wizard when I do it, so I'm just gonna say overhook. So when we get here now, the drill is this, right? So I'm gonna get like this, and I'm gonna go here. You see how I wave to there, and I put the back of my wrist on top of his neck? Now I'm gonna kind of body surf this direction. So see how it flattens him back out? Once we get here, he feeds me the underhook again on this side, right? And then we go back. He feeds me the underhook. Here, we go back. Okay? So let's say that I flipped him over, and like it's just not happening. He's expanding, he's trapping my arm, like this is not gonna work for me. So I've made the decision then to go here and pass to the other side. So do a couple different things when I make this pass to the other side. The first one, because it's cool, I don't know why. When we get here, I'm gonna rotate to this direction. And I get this nice deep underhook, and I'm flattening him back out, right? So when this hand's gotta do something, right? So I'm gonna punch this hand down. When I get to the side, I wanna punch this hand down against him here. And I'm gonna keep this frame and hook up tight on this side, okay? So I've gotten in deep, I bring my knee up to the outside of my elbow, and I take his other hand and I punch it to his stomach this way. Once I do that, I can lean pretty far on this side now because I'm still pretty stable, and his bridge doesn't affect me a whole lot right now, right? I'll keep this punch down so that now I can lift this leg over and around, right? As I do, I'm gonna pull his head up, kick through to here, this way, okay? And pass, now I can get either the triangle, or we can keep that arm for that shotgun style arm bar, okay? So, over here, we start from this condition where I'm trying to get this Darce. He's just shutting me down. So I'm gonna make that pass to the other side. I wanna punch that hand into his stomach, and I wanna try to get this nice and tight. So that my elbow is inside my knee here, so it's hard for him to pull that hand out. I stay here and I keep pushing this one down. This doesn't have to take a long time. This can take a fraction of a second, or it might take 10 seconds. I might be here. So now from here, I'm gonna kick over, pick up on the back of his head so that my leg passes through. I'd like to try not to do this. Kind of gives it away. So then, once we're here, this way, I lean and post out on this hand. I get my knees facing the same direction, and then I lock it up. Okay? So when we get here, if I stay with my elbow in front of my knee or my elbow on the outside of my knee, there's gonna be too much space and too much mobility for him. I'm trying to isolate this area here, the kata, right here, right? So I'm trying to get his neck and his shoulder and thereby control his shoulder carriage. So I'm bringing my knee on the outside as much as I can here. And then I'm cupping his head here to isolate it so that this can also turn into a pickup when I need it to on the step over. I'm punching down low, not high here. So I'm punching low. And I'm kind of like this. I'm almost north-south, right? Again, so his bridge doesn't affect me anymore, right? So when we get here, now once I go to kick over, here, kick and try to pick up. I think everybody in the room, at least I saw everybody typically do this one pretty decent good time, right? A lot of you guys are doing it great almost every time. Once we get here, then it's like, oh, Eli, I don't have like your slender, sleek stuff like quadriceps. I've got actual muscles. So I can't close this here. And it doesn't need to be closed, right? The triangle, I think like teaching the figure 4 for the triangle is a training wheels way to teach a triangle, right? Because this is not a good triangle. Right? This is a good triangle. Well, it's not because it doesn't look like a triangle anymore, but it's the pressure is what we're trying to accomplish. So when I get here, and this is shot underneath, that isn't necessary, right? I can finish it here. I can just put my shins on rails and squeeze tight like that. If I feel like it's just not getting the job done, well, I'm about 90% secure at that point, so you can just roll off and finish it from the guard, right? The inherent danger of going and finish it from the guard is like, yeah, you've given up your top position. And whenever you sacrifice your top position, just like I mentioned on the Darce earlier, and if you lose it, you're not just losing the submission, you're losing your position as well, and you just pull that person on top of you. But again, it's a trade-off. It's like, man, I'm that close to the finish line, I just can't quite get it. Maybe if I roll, I get like the ability to close those legs, it's gonna get the job done. So it's just one of those chances you have to take sometimes. I'm gonna pass around this side. So once this comes through and I see my hand, my thumb should be pointing back up at me this way, okay? The next step that comes through is this hand is gonna come through and I'm gonna clap together and I'm gonna fold those fingers inside like this, okay? So we're here, boom, like I'm high-fiving myself, I'm doing one of these, okay? So we go there, boom, S grip, and then from there I'm gonna turn that hand over this way. I want to put my head down toward his far shoulder and come here. Okay? Just makes sense? So once I make that pass, this is the one underneath his head. High five myself. All 4 fingers are going to lock up like this. Now, I want to turn this open triangle here into this closed thing. Right? So I'll bring my elbows together and I allow those fingers to turn. Right? If your hands and wrists are as arthritic as mine, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. But it's a sneaky choke. Like the baseball bat choke in the gi is already one that people like sleep on. Pun intended, like 2 ways. But this one, for sure, I've choked more people unconscious with this one, and that's not bragging, it's just like they don't think it's gonna be that tight. And you're usually, a lot of times it happens from the bad position. So that's when you get choked out a lot of the time. It's because you think, oh, I've still got time, right? So when we get here, we can do it off the same setup where I make that pass this way here and then just come through. So once I connect those 2 hands together and I slide it back, I slide the connection back to the neck here, this way. I fold the elbows in tight together and I start moving up toward his shoulders. Okay? Does that make sense, guys?
Are you walking the whole time or you
Good question. Let's start from this side. Once I'm here this way, right? Boom, make the connection. I pull that in, and then I'm going to move a little bit more toward north-south this way. This is a little harder, and the problem with this, if I want to make it tighter here, I'm going to have to kind of lean back, right? Which still may get it, but I'm also taking weight off of it. I don't like that. If I can keep weight on them, I prefer, to stay heavy. So yeah, I think a little more north-south on the finish. And plus, it doesn't require as much flexibility of your wrists if you go that angle too. Okay? Let's try this a couple times, guys. Ready? Let's go. He's closing one side more than the other, but I can get in by the neck, out by the armpit. I've got Anaconda territory, right? He closes, more by the neck, but I go in by the armpit, out by the neck. I can maybe get that flip over to my Darce. Yeah. If it happens, let's turn this way actually. If it happens that like I can get here, right? Or maybe this happened off the sprawl or whatever, but I'm like halfway, and I feel like maybe deepening to Anaconda or Darce from here is going to sacrifice my position. So I've got a good catch here still, right? So again, I'm keeping this in, I'm flexing my elbows down, my triceps and lats are coming together. And so I'm making a grip here. What I like to do on this one, there's different ones you're gonna hear. When people tell you this is the grip that you use, they're all usually right, except for the ones saying this is how you have to do it. Those are the people who are wrong. Okay? So when we get here, I'm cupping this way, okay? Right there on his chin. And I want that little V shape, that little snuff box, to match the V here on his trachea. And then I'm gonna grab right underneath there, right? So here and here. From there now, I'm gonna keep my weight on him, and I wanna hop until my hamstring comes to the back of his neck, right? As we do that, and I hop into that position, now as I go to sit, this leg comes over, right? Now I'm intentionally loosening my grip right now so I can still talk and not choking. But then from here, I'm pushing my legs away, and I'm pulling up and through the neck, right? Also have some like internal rotation of the knees coming together here so that he doesn't force that leg down, okay? So we're here. I've got that grip established underneath here. If you use an S grip, fine. S grip works too. So once we get there, I'm driving into him. Why? Because I get an opposite reaction a lot of the time. If he feels like I'm driving him because I want to flip him over, then a lot of times he'll like keep heavy down there, right? Which is good because he's actually pushing his neck deeper into the choke. So now once we get here, I'm gonna hop, sit, throw the leg over, and I'm gonna pull through his neck here, okay? Be careful with this one, it sucks really bad if you jump into it, and it's hard not to have to jump into it. So go one leg over, throw that second leg over, and then slow constriction on the squeeze. Any questions about this one? Peruvian necktie, okay? Let's go, 1, 2, 3. Guard, and I'm gonna get like a perpendicular radius right across his neck. I'm gonna grab my elbow, I'm gonna wrap my legs around him. I'm gonna push my 2 legs away, and I'm gonna pull and stretch like I'm trying to pop his head off. And that works. It's a real thing, it actually works. The likelihood of a technical person defending that though, there's a lot better ways to defend that. He can post his head on the floor, he can pop his head out if his neck is very strong, you don't have a lot of good coverage, and your angle is a little messed up, and you're flat on your back underneath him. All these things are fighting against you for a technical person to be able to defend. So let's work on one that's a little harder for the technical people to defend, and it's almost the opposite in so many ways of that application. So the way I'm gonna set it up is just straight from the guard. A lot of times you'll learn it like off of a failed hip bump sweep, right? Anybody ever learn all this, right? So you come back. The thing I like about this is that as I go for this hip bump sweep, I'm cutting this angle to sweep him, and as he resists me and drives me back, it almost like puts me off to the side of how I want to get it, right? So whether you want to do it from the hip bump or not, it's fine. But we are going to do it arm in guillotine, because if he's likely to tackle into me, the likelihood of that shoulder being here and me not being able to get in front of that shoulder for my high elbow guillotine is high, right? So the way that let's do it this way. So if he's just here, failed hip bump or whatever, but the indication is he's got horizontal posture, my posture is fairly vertical. As I'm wrapping back through to here, right, immediately the back of my wrist kind of hits him in the chest here, like that. Why? Yeah, I don't really know. But it's good. So it's actually a good space saver, and it helps me to be able to get my second hand in and then adjust on the way. It also allows me to get this little strip of like pectoral meat right on the back of his neck here like that. So, and then again, that's why I was using that snuff box on the Peruvian to kind of segue into this. This little snuff box idea here like this, where that bend matches his trachea right there, and I'm cupping the blade of that hand. And then I'm bringing my elbow down and in this way. So I'm thinking kind of like I'm carrying a football, which I'm not sure I've ever done in my entire life, but it's what it looks like to me. So when we're here, this side is pulling up kind of into his armpit, and I should have an angle off to the side by the time we get here, where I close my guard back, and I actually pull him in with my legs. And then of course the final piece is like a slight uppercut on that football side, and it's pretty quick, right? And it's sharp too. I think that this should be sharp. The thing I like about it is that because of this shape, that little protuberant thing right here, that little radial notch or whatever the hell that is kind of stabbing him in the trachea. But the reason it's gonna make a cleaner like strangle is that it's pushing this in here. And then this and that thumb pad start to touch the carotid branching, you know? Like I think that's like perfect application if that happens. You may be off center, maybe more like sharp windpipe or something, but that's what's gonna get it done. So over here, I wrap, going here like this, okay? Again, kind of pushing his chest open so that by the time this comes in and I clamp it, it's gonna circle right into his neck. The triceps coming to meet the lat on this side, elbows coming in, almost like a slight uppercut. As we fall to that side, I'm bringing the guard up nice and high on his back and I'm pulling him in as I stuff that elbow, okay? So let's go do it like that, or if you have a better way of doing it, then do it your way, I don't care. But any questions about that? Let's go, 1, 2, 3. Again, if I'm entering into this off of like a feel hip bump speed, I want to cut, bang, like this. Almost think about DDTing him into the floor, right? So now what's he gonna do to fight this choke? Oftentimes he'll go directly to the source like he was just about to start to do right there. I don't know what that sentence was. Like he was just about to start to do there. So once he goes to the source and starts pulling my wrist away like that, right? So he's pulling, I'm pulling, trying to squeeze, and he's like, no, and I'm like, yeah, and then he's like, no. And so once I play tug of war here, and he pulls, and I let go of the rope, boom, this way, okay? So he wants to pull it to here. I'm gonna punch it to here, this way. I'm bringing, again, my thumb back up toward my face. Now, at this point here, you can gable grip, depending on the size, right? If you can get all the way to here, this is pretty strong. Yeah, this is pretty awful. Yeah, sorry. So it's pretty bad. So now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna arch this way. As I'm doing that, I want this foot eventually to find the space in between his legs. Here, to help with that sweep. Now, if you notice, like, a lot of times he doesn't like for this arm to stay out here, it sucks, right? So it's okay, I'm like, that's fine, you can have it. And allow that arm to come inside. And my foot is in between his legs like a half guard. From there now, I'm gonna post, I wanna pick up and make that nice little space. Now I pop that knee through here, and then as we start to fall back to that side, I swap. Here. Okay? So that's how we can transition our guillotine to like a makeshift reversal, right? Almost a sweep, might be a sweep. Depends on your referee. But when we get here, this way, he goes up and tries to pull my wrist away. Again, don't immediately give it to him, like make him tug a war with you so he stays committed. Here. Now this comes up, you may have to just gable grip because he's massive up here, right? But if he can get here, this way, I'm pulling his shoulder to my chest with this rear naked style grip. And then now I'm gonna start arching back here. I'm gonna pike my hips so he's seeing how his arm can come through. That'll give me the ability now to drop, sit, and this is fantastic if it happens because now I've got his bottom on track. Right? I'm gonna make that switch here so that I can get back to my seatbelt. Right? And then now I've got the choke opportunity. Okay? You guys catch all that?
One more time.
One more time, sure. Let's do it the different direction here. Yeah, sure. Okay, so coming up, he's tackling. I go back for my guillotine here. He pulls my hand. I resist, let go. Gable grip or rear naked choke style grip. I start to arch back here. Sweep. Allow his arm to come through. And I pick up. I lag, I post. So I've got a good tripod base. My knee starts to slide through here. Punch up, through. Okay? Right. So we're here like this. Let us go ahead and make it more from the reference of what I was saying. So we go here, he pulls, I punch, we get here. How do I start this? Right? If you get in that position, you don't know. Arch, right? Let your eyes literally trace an arc pattern like that across your body. Here, right? That's gonna stretch them out. I'm gonna let that foot stay between. I'm gonna pick them up right here. Okay? This is not, like taking the back is not even your only option right now, right? You can shoot the triangle like we talked about, right? You can go back to see the guillotine from here, that's pretty gnarly, right? But then you can also get here. Look, this is where I'm making that transfer from underhook to underhook, right? Because if I'm late on this, it's gonna corrupt the position. Now, as we fall, punch, okay? Does that make sense, guys? Once we're here, you guys probably know what to do.